Welcome to 1920 by Omar Cuellar. The year was 1989. The sky over Bennington, Vermont, hung gray and dull above me, as if it shared my mourning. I walked with my head bowed through the desolate streets, my soul in shreds and my heart drowning in thick sadness. I had just left the funeral of my best friend, and the image of his body lying in the coffin kept hammering inside my mind. I had never seen a dead person before, and that sight had cut deep, an invisible wound that refused to stop bleeding. I felt the unbearable weight of absence. I would never again hear his laugh, share secrets, or argue over trivial things. Loneliness had become my only companion. The air was heavy with moisture, and the sky threatened to unleash its own tears at any moment. My footsteps echoed on the damp sidewalk as I wandered aimlessly, letting grief guide my feet. Bennington stretched around me like an empty stage. Its old houses seemed to watch me in silence, their windows like lifeless eyes. I couldn't shake the image of my friend in his coffin, hands crossed over his chest, face still, serene, and utterly unaware of the pain his departure left behind. Every corner of the town evoked a shared memory, and now those memories stung like thorns embedded in my mind. In the midst of that sepulchral silence, a soft, delicate melody slicked through the bare trees. I stopped. It was a pure, ethereal sound coming from a piano. The music danced in the cold air, briefly breaking the oppressive melancholy. Following the source of the melody, my steps led me down a secondary road bordered by rusted wire fencing. Farther ahead, isolated amid neglected fields and overgrown weeds, stood a solitary farmhouse, one of those places that seemed abandoned to the passage of time. The house, though beautiful in its antique structure, showed clear signs of neglect. The paint on the facade was peeling, and wild grass grew unchecked around it, swallowing parts of the fence. The windows, coated in dust and cobwebs, reflected the leaden sky like broken mirrors. Yet the melody continued to flow from inside, drawing me with an almost hypnotic force. That was when I noticed movement on the front porch. There were people there. I approached cautiously, and through the undergrowth made out two cameramen filming a couple in front of the house. My heart lurched when I recognized the man. He was one of my favorite Hollywood actors. I had seen him in so many films that his gestures and expressions felt familiar. He was arguing with a young woman, and though at first I thought it was part of a scene, something in the intensity of his movements put me on edge. The argument turned violent in seconds. The actor shoved the woman roughly, and she fell to the ground. My pulse raced. I hesitated for a moment, thinking it must be scripted, but what happened next shattered me completely. The man threw himself on her and began beating her mercilessly. Then, in a brutal and unexpected act, he raped her right there, under the watchful eyes of the cameramen. A knot of horror closed my throat. I looked at the cameramen, expecting some sign that it was all a hoax, a movie setup. But their faces were cold, impassive, as if everything were utterly real. Dizziness overwhelmed me, and I couldn't hold it back. I vomited into the bushes. The grotesque sight and my own powerlessness consumed me. Logic tried to force its way through my confused mind. It's just a film, I kept telling myself. Yet the primal fear kept me frozen. I debated whether I should intervene, help the young woman, but the thought of bursting onto a movie set paralyzed me. The confusion was so great that I convinced myself it had to be fiction, until the actor raised his head and his eyes locked onto mine. His face, previously rehearsed and controlled for the cameras, twisted into a grimace of rage. He stood up abruptly, pulled up his pants, and strode toward me with determined steps. My legs refused to move. I tried to back away, but terror rooted me to the spot. From a distance, he drew a Star pistol and without hesitation, fired through the rusted wire. I didn't feel the impact at first, just a sudden heat on my forehead and the sight of my own thick blood pouring over my trembling hands. The pain came later, like a distant echo. I collapsed to the ground and with great effort, crawled until I found a gap in the fencing. I hid among the tall grass as my consciousness faded amid the pounding heartbeat and the ringing in my ears. Time lost all meaning. I don't know how long I remained unconscious, but when my eyes opened again, the light had changed. I struggled to sit up. Dried blood had formed scabs on my forehead. The house was still there, but the silence was absolute. There was no trace of the actor, the woman, or the cameraman. I staggered away, fleeing the house as if escaping a nightmare. But something was different. When I reached the town, I noticed details that didn't match what I knew. Vintage cars, shop windows displaying items from another era, the clothing of the passers-by. Somehow I was still in Bennington, but in a different time. I didn't question it. My stunned mind focused only on helping the young woman. I headed to the sheriff's office, its wooden facade looking like something out of an old book. There, with a trembling voice and halting words, I recounted everything that had happened. At first my story was met with skepticism, but the severity of my wound and my agitated state convinced the sheriff to launch an investigation. More than 3 months of relentless pursuit passed before they finally captured the rapist. He was imprisoned after a short but decisive trial. During that time, my life became intertwined with the young woman I had tried to save. Her name was Evelyn, and she was now pregnant with her attacker's child. The bond that formed between us was unexpected but profound. Our shared tragedy linked us beyond reason. In time, the child was born, and Evelyn and I decided to raise him together. We married in a simple ceremony, promising to care for that little boy without him ever knowing the horror of his origin. Yet one quiet afternoon, Evelyn shared a detail that left me frozen. She confessed that on the day of the assault, she had been living alone in the farmhouse with that man, the man who raped her. There had been no one else in the house. So who had been playing that melody on her piano? Who had played the music that drew me to the house? The question hung in the air like the final note of a forgotten song. Though we wanted to find a logical answer, part of us understood that some things we would never fully comprehend. Our second child was born in 1922.